Being able to walk your dog off leash is something a lot of people strive for, and for good reason, right? Like, even if you don't have a backyard, you want to give your dog that freedom to walk without a leash. If the area permits your dog to be off leash, you obviously want to be able to do that. But the thing is, walking your dog off leash requires a lot of training, a lot of practice, a lot of reinforcement. So today I want to go over just kind of the basics of what you can do to get your dog prepared to be perfect off leash like Mochi is. And I'm in the middle of a mountain in Switzerland, so I might forget some things because I didn't necessarily write down my notes, but these are really the basics of how to get started preparing your dog to be off leash reliably. So the absolute first thing you want to do when preparing your dog to be off leash and preparing them to be really good off leash is to make sure that they know how to listen to you. And by that I mean that they know recall really well, or they know things like stop in their tracks really well. This is obviously really important because those are kind of the fundamentals of letting your dog have that freedom and earn that freedom. But especially things like recall, it's not just like your dog listens to you when you say come. It's more like you can recall your dog off anything, because in the wild you're going to encounter things like deer, other dogs, people. So you want to be able to recall them really reliably off of all those things. And to do that, I have a whole video on recall, but to put it in a very short and sweet sentence, it would be a lot of positive reinforcement for them recalling, and also just not letting them off leash before they're ready, which is obviously a huge thing here. The thing is, when you let your dog off leash before they're entirely ready, you're going to end up in a situation where they don't act the way you want them to act, and they're going to continue reinforcing that for themselves by doing bad things. And since they're off leash already before they're ready, you can't necessarily shape them as well as you could if you were to be more patient, keep them on a leash until they're ready. And speaking of leashes, you definitely want to keep your dog on a leash and make sure they can walk really well on a leash before even attempting to go off leash. The thing with Mochi is he spent like the majority of his life on a leash, as most dogs probably should. Obviously, if you live on like 20 acres of land and your dog can be off leash all the time, that's a wonderful life. But if you live in a more realistic situation like me, where you might live in an apartment or might have a small yard and you want to do these fun adventures in the wilderness, you want to sacrifice just a few months of your dog's life in the beginning and then also continuing on throughout their life by keeping them on a leash. When your dog is used to walking with you on a leash, they're less likely to roam away because they're so used to being near you, especially if you train them to walk on a leash well. So no pulling, no, sprinting side to side. You want to make sure they're trained to walk on a leash like this, a normal standard leash, not a long leash. But that doesn't mean I'm against long leashes. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of long leashes. So speaking of long leashes, you want to make sure that your dog is able to enjoy the freedom before they're actually ready to go off leash. So instead of jumping into going off leash, get a long leash and let them have that freedom without being totally free, so you're not having those risks of them running away or something or not listening to you. Just like I did right there, you also want to reward your dog often when they're off leash for just being near you, not necessarily when you call them. So obviously, if you're practicing recall and they come when you call, you want to reinforce them with very high value treats, blah, blah, blah. But also, if you're walking off leash and your dog just randomly checks in with you, you want to reward them. So you should start in the beginning with really high value treats, but as they get better, you could keep reinforcing them with normal things like treats. And I still do this to this day because reinforcement is really the number one rule of how to reinforce good behavior. And if you want your dog to stay close, not run away, you want to reinforce things like checking in by giving them treats. I just found a tick on him. So yeah, reinforcing is really the way to go. Another really important thing about having your dog be reliable off leash is to be really entertaining on the walk. This is not something you have to do for the rest of your life every time you walk with your dog off leash, but especially at the beginning, you want to be super entertaining. So one thing I like to do with Mochi is to do like fun tricks as we're off leash walking. So for example, we could do stuff like this. Through! Yes! Okay, he is so hot right now that he's not very enthusiastic, but stuff like this keeps them engaged with you and keeps you the priority and their focus. You can also play games like search, where you spread treats on the ground near you so he has to come find them when he's off leash. Search! Search! Constantly being engaging for your dog when they're off leash kind of reminds them that you are the most important thing of the walk. No matter how much fun they're having, sniffing the trees, sniffing the grass, you are the center of their attention at all times, or you should be. And stuff like this kind of reels them back in. Also, obviously, it helps that you're giving them something great when you're doing these little check-in activities. Like when I'm saying search to find the treats, he gets treats and he knows it's coming from me. Or even when he's doing the through trick through my legs and checking in with me, he's getting rewarded with treats. So he's getting something good out of it, and he learns that coming to check in with me means good things for him. So as you can see here, Mochi always kind of keeps an eye on me and whatever I'm doing when we're off leash. And this is an indicator that your dog is a really reliable dog off leash. Obviously, in addition to him listening and stuff. Come here, Mo. Yeah. Yeah, so you want to be able to confirm that your dog is able to listen to you, to pay attention to you. Even just right now when I said U-turn, he knows that means to turn around 180 degrees. He just has these commands down. And that's why I know that when we go to really cool places like this, like a trail in Switzerland, like I said, he's able to go off leash and I can trust him. Now, that doesn't mean he's 100% reliable, and that's when you have to come in and kind of be his extra eyes. No dog is ever 100% perfect. I know I said Mochi is perfect. That's not true. No dog is perfect. So whenever your dog is off leash, you have the responsibility to be extra alert. Always have only one AirPod in, so I can always hear. I always keep my eyes out, like scanning all over my environment, because if there's a deer or even if there's a squirrel, I want to be able to see that before Mochi and be able to act proactively. Mochi and I have practiced recalling off of wildlife before, so he's probably fine, but why take that risk when we're in the wilderness? And also, it's not just for Mochi's safety, it's also for the wildlife. I want to respect the wildlife, so you want to keep these extra eyes out. Also, God forbid it's something kind of dangerous, like maybe a bear or something like that. That's why you always have to be super alert as well when your dog is off leash. So the responsibility is kind of 50-50 between you and your dog. Hopefully this helps you guys prepare your dog to be off leash so you can go on these amazing adventures with your dog. Obviously, if your dog's not ready to be off leash, and some dogs will never be ready, and that's totally fine, then you could just, invest in a long leash or even a flexi leash, and you're still able to enjoy these adventures and your dog is still able to run around freely and have a great time. Now that you know how to get your dog to be reliable off leash, make sure to check out the video links here on the screen about getting amazing recall with your dog.